era interessato
So I hope we can now resume. I hope that the coffee and Italian refreshment was up to your expectations. And Javier Materialacci from the Environment Committee, who will be chairing the next session. And we have
one question about the vote we just observed. I hope it was not a final vote, because the majority voted against. Can you explain?
No, it wasn't the final vote.
Can you explain what we voted? What was voted about?
It was a procedural vote to move the Jobs Act to another phase. So it was asked by the opposition, and so yeah.
Okay, they were.
It was not the final vote.
Opposition was defeated.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have the last Roberta Lichtenegger from Austria now has the floor.
Und vielen herzlichen Dank.
Thank you very much for making it possible for us to participate and have a look at the vote. It was very impressive indeed, and your plenary hall is just beautiful, a magnificent hall, as we would expect in this beautiful building. Thank you very much for the presentations we have heard this morning. They were very inspiring. The Innovation Union is also something that there is a publication about. I think it's called Innovation Union Corpus. It evaluates the strategies, and it is also a basis for the member states to review their own strategies and see what their weaknesses and strengths are in this field. For the economy, as we know from all the figures, it is very important to invest in research and development in order to create a basis for positive economic growth. And research and development are also a basis for finding answers to the big questions, the big challenges that we're faced with. For example, secure energy supply, climate protection, demographic development, especially in the Western industrialized countries, and the big topic of healthcare. We know that companies, be they big or small or medium-sized, need research and development in order to gain a competitive edge. Research gives a first-mover advantage on the market and, as a consequence, secures growth and employment. We know that basic research has very great significance, but it depends very much on how we close what we call the innovation cycle or build an innovation chain. And that means that innovation is translated into actual services and products. In Austria, we have devised a research strategy, and that strategy will also lay the foundations for future policies. We have a research rate of 82%. We work on raising that rate, but we also want to find out how we can improve our research and innovation system. It is a big challenge, but all of the Austrian political parties agree that this is an important area and that we want to keep promoting it. Europe it must be an attractive location for research and development. And I think it even has to step up its activities. For that to happen, we need collaboration between the research institutions in Europe. And at the same time, I think it is very important to increase the resources. We have heard this morning that there are big differences depending on the region, depending on the country. And I think it really is the task of the member states to do more and make more resources available, but it's also a task that pertains to all of the European Union. The European Union has to motivate smaller member states to invest more. Another thing that I found very useful, and we heard about this in one of the papers, and this is that public spending for research development should be seen in relation to the Stability and Growth Pact. This would really facilitate investment in this area. All of these are tasks that need to be done to make Europe more competitive, to make it fit for the future. We know that we live in an increasingly globalized world with very fierce competition. As we discussed yesterday, we are also very much interested in promoting employment along with economic growth in Europe.
Molte grazie.
Many thanks. And we now have the one speaker who's just been added, Peter Droll from the European Commission.
Very much, President. There were two calls on the Commission, and I would like to briefly respond to that. The first one was on simplification. I would like to be very clear that we share the concerns expressed and the ambition for simplification. I would also like to add that we have introduced an instrument in the new funding program for small and medium-sized companies with a time to contract of 5 months, which is best practice also compared to DARPA. We have, compared to previous programs, reduced the time to contract with a legal requirement to do it within 9 months, which is ambitious considering that we are talking about European consortia which need to be built, but we are delivering on this simplification agenda and would be open to further continuously reduce the red tape surrounding funding. I think we have reached a level which is comparable to the best practice looking at Europe. The second point I wanted to briefly touch upon is the impact assessment. We do have good figures what we get out of the European Framework Programme through the impact assessment, the ex ante and ex post assessments, and I would be happy to make them available. So let me close with a thanks to the Italian EU presidency. Italy has put the European research area firmly on the agenda, and this is an important element to increase the competition, the competitiveness of the European research system, and contribute to the structural reforms needed to create jobs and growth in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Droll. Adesso io...
And now I would leave the floor to our 3 keynote speakers for some reaction to the points that were expressed by the discussants. I think it might be useful for all the members, and as well as for us.
La parola...
I'd like to give the floor first, therefore, to Professor Beckman.
Thank you for this interesting discussion. I really want to emphasize one main point that's been made by Professor Cingolani here, which is about really the requirement for the scientific system to be based on meritocracy. So that means that if you look at the various systems in which science is pursued across various countries, there's a wide variation of practices for the assumption of the workforce, how somebody is maintained, and how somebody is promoted. And for example, in the Anglo-Saxon system, we recruit locally, not even at the level of the school. We make the decision on recruitment in the department. So it's a peer recruitment process that is obviously also governed by wider frameworks. However, it's local and it's peer assessment. Similarly, for promotion, it's about the evaluation of the ongoing evaluation of our colleagues, mutual evaluation in terms of meritocratic scientific performance, which is a very important means for growing excellence, in science. And this is also something that, ironically, I believe is actually transportable across geographic contexts, because the scientific workforce is very mobile internationally. So wherever they find good conditions, the scientific system is global anyhow. It doesn't really matter where you are, because you're working within your sort of invisible college anyhow all the time. So where you find your excellent conditions, that's where you will be. So it is possible for countries where, let's say, that don't have any capacity or have weaker capacity as yet. It is possible to grow scientific capacity relatively quickly if the investment is made and if the institutional conditions are made right. And I think the example of the Italian Institute of Technology shows that conclusion very well.
Thank you very much. Adesso chiedo.
Now I'd like to ask Professor Cingolani to take the floor. Yes, I'll be very brief. I think that it's very what was said by some representatives of the UK and Germany was very interested, who pointed to the need to simplify European procedures too, and the representative of the Commission's indicated some simplifications, and I think in particularly for SMEs this could facilitate access to funds, as a problem which we're all aware of. And this global awareness helps us to see things in simpler terms. And another thing which was brought up by former Minister Carrozza, who spoke very broadly and indicated the possibility of a European scientist as a category. Probably in terms of remuneration or labour law, it's difficult to have a European standard for a European scientist, but the United States of Europe has to begin with science and begin to have some ideas on how recruiting of scientists can be carried out supranationally. I think that would be very useful. And the third point, which many people have touched on, is the importance of giving adequate value and investing in intellectual property, which has always been a minor consideration for academic research, but it's something we need to improve if we want to promote public-private partnerships. A lot of discussions on the European patent, and there's a lot of points which are being debated with regard to European patents. If there was an agenda of this kind, which Europe could discuss, we could have a more effective European research area. And then obviously we have our national issues, and there everybody has to deal with their own problems. There's homework to be done, I think, in a few countries. Thank you.
Grazie, Professor.
Thank you, Professor Cingolani. And now Professor Archibugi.
Grazie dei commenti.
Thank you for the comments. I really don't have much to add. And I would repeat what I said. It seems to me that some representatives have really grasped the problem that the Stability Pact is an excessive constraint on funding public research, particularly in European countries where research is weakest. And therefore, it is absolutely necessary to ensure that public funding for research is excluded from the Stability Pact. And I think you can't get clearer than that. And I believe that the Austrian representative took that on board. And I can understand that some countries like Germany, which have already reached the Lisbon and Barcelona goals, or very close to them, are less interested or feel this to be a less acute problem. But in order to create a European research area, this research has to be carried out not just in Sweden, Finland, Germany, in the stronger countries, but also in the weaker countries. And I also reiterate that obviously we need to establish favorable conditions. Today we have a big problem in attracting private investment. Up to a few years ago, Europe, the United States and Japan fought for them, and now we have emerging countries who are trying to obtain these investments because they provide very good remuneration. If we want companies to continue to invest in Europe, we have to provide conditions which are attractive. And among these, first of all, before intellectual property rights and before tax incentives, we have to have the availability of highly skilled staff, which we can produce in Europe and which we need to be able to keep in Europe to make Europe attractive enough for them to stay here. And this is one of the areas where the public sector should carry out the responsibility of the public sector, that is to say, provide skilled people from universities who can be hired by companies. Mr. Kaplan is quite right in saying that all the initiatives to reduce bureaucracy are welcome, and I'm saying that bureaucracy and red tape is not something which exists solely in Brussels. Unfortunately, the waiting times which we Italians have when we manage to be awarded one of the programs of the Ministry for Research and Technology are much longer than the waiting times for the European funds, and the European Commission waiting times are not too different from what you get with the systems you have in the UK. For example, the Economic and Social Research Council. Don't think the times are that different, and so we do have this habit of criticizing the European Union, something which is very, very widespread in the United Kingdom. I agree with the Baroness, I must say. Times can be made shorter, but this applies to the European Commission, but it also applies to the Member States. First and foremost Italy, but also the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Grazie, Professor Archibugi.
Thank you, Professor Archibugi. If you allow, I would like to conclude this session by stressing some points which have surfaced very clearly this morning. The first thing is meritocracy. Each country has its own culture, its own history, and each country has operating mechanisms which are often different from those in other parts of Europe or in Asia or the United States. Certainly, research and innovation without meritocracy are not really possible. And we know that meritocracy generates a positive process because people who have advanced through meritocracy tend to make use of people who have similar skills or who are even have superior skills. And this would lead us to have a growth of European excellence in the European research area. Shouldn't forget that we need to compete with Asian excellency and the excellency of the United States. And we also had the European scientist stressed by a number of people. Anybody who spent time in research laboratories is aware of this and know how difficult it can be to recruit adequately trained people who have the qualifications and the motivation to follow up projects. If there are difficulties in having their certifications recognized as equal, or if they're hampered by the difficulty of having work permits, unless we're speaking of very low-level types of work, such as fellowships and scholarships. I believe that European scientists is something which we need to invest in, and all member states have to contribute towards this. I'd just like to give you all an example, which was something I was personally involved in, which was to establish the category of independent researchers in Italy. Independent researchers, people who've won grants and not envisaged by public entities, and therefore Italian ERC grant winners tend to go abroad or tend to work for entities which aren't 100% public.
Un altro passaggio importante.
Another important issue is red tape, the national red tape, which we all know of and which we discover on a daily basis, how this bureaucracy is self-perpetuating, but also bureaucracy, the bureaucracy in the European Union, which often makes things very complicated, reporting, for example, all these things which are connected to research projects. Just to give you an example, when I worked in a laboratory, we were stopped for 8 months because of a Danish institute, which was part of our research group, had changed its name. And the fact of a research institute changing name can lead to a number of problems which can bring a project to a standstill. Finally, I would like to mention the importance for all member states to strive to ensure that the Lisbon project is complied with, and that countries that invest little in research, like Italy, should be able to reach the 3% level. I know that a summary of this meeting will be prepared. It will be circulated and made available on the website of the Chamber of Deputies. I thank you for your participation. I apologize for the break we had to make. For the vote, it wasn't something which we decided, of course, and I'll leave the floor to the President of the Environment Committee, who will be chairing the 4th session, Citizens as Flywheels for Innovation. Thank you.
Grazie, iniziamo con un po' di ritardo, quindi avremo...
Thank you. We're slightly late, So our session is going to have to proceed at rapid pace. The theme is cities as drivers of innovation. We have three keynote speakers: Flavia Marzano, President of the States Journal of Innovation; Michele Vianello, Arts at Invenshow; and Alessandro Rinaldi, who is with the Unit for Economic Studies of the Italian Union of Chambers of Commerce, Union Camere. Cities are important in Europe. This is something we're all aware of. Europe is characterized by a different form of urbanization. Our cities on the whole are small to medium-sized. Cities and towns have a very long history, and the issue of technology, of course, is important for our cities. In Italy, for instance, our challenge is that of ensuring that beauty, history, and our heritage can go hand in hand with innovation and high-tech systems. Obviously, many programs in the European Union target cities in the area of energy, environment, climate, education, culture, and the link between smart cities and the green economy is a particularly important theme in the concrete economy that is evolving as we speak. So I'd like to just share a couple of thoughts with you. Firstly, the topic that we're discussing is very relevant. Let's not forget that there is a concomitant meeting taking place today in Rome on climate change, the Globe Conference, and consequently the topic of climate change cannot be seen just in terms of defensive measures and obligations. You have recently observed that an important agreement was reached between the United States and China on the subject of climate change. It is a politically important agreement, but technically it lags behind Europe, because Europe has made more challenging agreements which can be the foundation for a new economy, and we're already seeing this in practice. The Italian Parliament conducted a fact-finding survey on the green economy, pursuant to which, and also in the light of the Chamber of Commerce's data, in our country, since the beginning of the crisis, approximately 1/3 of manufacturing industries and 1/5 of all businesses have invested in activities that have to do with the green economy of the environment: energy savings, water savings, waste reduction, products that are more environmentally friendly. These are the sectors that are doing better. Their export figures are double that of other businesses. They innovate twice as much as other businesses. They produce more jobs. In the course of 2014, 60% of all new jobs in Italy have to do with the green economy. And as far as research and development are concerned, 70% of jobs have to do with the environment and the green economy. And this brings us back to our cities, because most of the economy I have described, for instance, has to do with new building approaches. Indeed, the most effective instrument that Italy has adopted to offset the impact of the crisis was a tax incentive that encouraged citizens to improve their housing in terms of energy savings, and we have produced 340,000 jobs in the entire supply chain for this purpose. And when we talk about building and construction, obviously we're not just talking about buildings proper, but also domotics, new materials, heating systems, new boilers, and so on. So the system is very important, and I think that cities are, in a way, at the core of this process of change that we're witnessing in Europe. And a second remark I would like to make is that today citizens can truly develop ownership of this process, more so than was the case in the past. I would like to illustrate this by way of the following example, which has to do with Italy and Europe as a whole. Changing behaviors and new technologies are giving rise to policies that were unthinkable only a few years ago. In the city of Milan, there are 120,000 citizens who use car sharing. 120,000 people have opted for this. You must understand that Italians have a very special and almost perverse relationship with their cars. We're big car users, and cars are seen as an old symbol of freedom. If 120,000 residents in a city like Milan, which has just over 1 million population, are prepared, and we're talking about young people, to share a car, this is extraordinary. It's become very easy to use car sharing systems with the new applications, with the possibility of exploiting new technologies. And this indicates that there is room for change, more so than we suspected. And I think that in this interaction between technological innovation, research, and preservation of our heritage, we're really going to get somewhere. History, quality, culture is what cities are about, in Italy and elsewhere. So this is not just a thing of the past. This is an opportunity for the future, and I very much hope that the European Union's policies will drive this process forward. I very much hope that the 300 billion euros that Juncker has promised, and of course we're very much in support of this. We voted for Juncker because of the promise, in fact, that he made. And I very much hope that this will be focused on urban quality and innovation in the cities, because this is fundamental for Europe. Sorry for having spoken too long, and I would like to now call on Flavia Marzano, who is the President of the States General of Innovation. Thank you. Thank you, Hermete.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here because you've given me a cue, coincidentally, probably, as soon as we get the slides. Concept of ecosystem. Ecosystem understood not just in traditional ecology, but as a system which can only function if all the components are linked. Smart city. These are the six basic components of smartness. Many people faced by these things are skeptical. I have a lot of fun with acronyms, and I find it very difficult not to do this today. I tried to provide an acrostic of skeptic rather than an acronym. And so I'll be speaking to you of stakeholders. There are stakeholders in every environment, in every city, but it is necessary for them to be involved bottom up.
Gli attori che vivono una città. È essenziale l'ascolto.
All the people in the city have to be involved. So listening and co-planning, joint planning is important, because each person involved has their own specific skills. Aggregated and associated realities. I teach technology for the public administration at the Sapienza University, but I wanted to speak as the president of an association because it's a multi-stakeholder association. This is the key which I wanted to stress here. It's important to aggregate, combine lots of realities from different areas. Before I was listening, I think from the UK someone was speaking of bottom-up cooperation between stakeholders and administration. The community is important, the community which exists locally, and it has to be expanded, has to be promoted by the people governing an area, because there has to be continuing positive feedback between public administration, enterprises, citizens and associations to reach collective and connective intelligence. So we have to have all the actors in the ecosystem involved. Technologies are not neutral. They're definitely a tool. They can be used well or badly, but they're not neutral. And in this context, they can be used for narrow or elite social groups, or alternatively, they can be used to make a whole city, a whole local area smart, including marginal peripheries. And here, the political action of those governing an area is important, so that peripheries are also digitally included. There has to be an active involvement of politics. The P of participation. ICTs are certainly tools that can help us, such as social media and participatory platforms. I'm sure you've heard of liquid feedback. Not just that. The European Commission for the Digital Agenda set up a consultation platform, which is IdeaScale. There are lots of instruments which allow us to promote collective and connective intelligence, which I was referring to previously, with trust-based interaction, which also has to expand between administration and citizens. Turning to technologies now, there are lots of technologies, and obviously I can't cover them all. But there's information technology, the old ones, but there are also public virtual areas, newsletters, technologies for dialogue, not just chat rooms, forums, mailboxes and blogs, technologies for consultation, for online surveys and online voting, which facilitate participation. Innovation now. This is the strongest word, in my opinion. For innovation, the most important thing is integration of diversity, seeing diversity as a positive and creative value. It's thanks to diversity that ecosystems survive. It is with what is different that it's possible to grow, to develop. And the Web 2.0 philosophy, which has to be adopted as a method of life, administration and governance. Complex systems. This is something which was mentioned by former Minister Carrozza. It's in the document which was the basic document for this session. Complex systems are systems which scientists have examined now for a long time, and these are systems which undergo continuous changes which individually are foreseeable, predictable, but it's very hard to see what how the system will develop in future. As the quantity and the variety of relations between elements of the system increase, the also increases. So this is these are things which hard science has been dealing with for a long time, and obviously they need to continue to do this. Think of how complex a city is, or how complex an area is, not just because of the actors, but also because it generates constant demands, and relations change and expand among all the constituents of the system. And here all technologies can be useful. The S of Smart City, I added for all, so as to ensure digital inclusion and the overcoming of the digital divide. It's not just providing wide band connection, and there's a lot to be done and it also means gender-based social, economic and cultural development. A report's recently come out with the 69th, and which is a terrible result if you consider that the countries of the European Union are only 28, so we certainly need to work on that. Another thing, probably because I'm a technologist, an ICT specialist, for me, it's essential to be able to measure what's happening with indicators inside a public administration. So we have to have concrete, measurable goals, because when a politician tells me he wants to improve my quality of life, I'm very happy about that, but I don't have a quality meter. I don't have any instruments to check whether they've really improved my quality of life. Tell me that you want to reduce traffic near my house by 50%. That's something measurable. And if you do cut it by 51%, I'll say, well done. 49%, I'll say, not bad. And if it's 5%, I'll say, that's no good. So we need to measure things. And we may still be skeptical. I've expanded the acronym for skepticism. There's another one which is OPS, openness, PFE, and I'll tell you something about that, and sharing. Openness, in my opinion, has to be considered in all its full declination. We spoke of open government, open data. You've spoken that yesterday with Lorenzo Benussi, open access, the university open source for public administration, to open standard, open mind, which is always useful, open innovation too. And everything, therefore, which makes it possible to cooperate, relinquishing a proprietary attitude over knowledge. There's no point putting a flag and saying this is mine. It's much better to share knowledge and skills, replacing a bad syndrome, which the Americans have called the not invented here syndrome. Anything not invented here is no good, with another slogan, PFE, proudly found elsewhere. So we need to learn to reuse solutions which already proved their validity. Reuse is something which has long been discussed in Italy, reuse of software, reuse of best practices. The European Commission's been talking about that for a long time. Perhaps we could suggest a repository for European reuse, a repository of solutions, repository of software, repository of models to be copied, because I realize that a best practice is best because of the context it's in, because of the politicians, the technical experts, the citizens, the shareholders. But the model can be replicated and adapted to other situations. And I've heard, looking at what's happening in Europe, there are fantastic solutions in almost everything here and there in Europe. So let's try and pool these things. What do we give up if we share? Certainly there's something we give up. First thing I think of is patents. You can't use my patent, I earn on it. But you also earn something and gain something through sharing. There's this is a pun in Italian. Sharing, you say condividing, and here it says condividing multiplies. So sharing multiplies. And I'd like to end with this definition of a smart city, which is an open ecosystem, open in all the facets of openness. Technological, because you're using technologies. Technologies are a means, not an end, and these are made use of in an open, truly open way. These are my data, and you can find me on the internet. Thank you also for having made such an effort at defining things, and that was very interesting. Now I'd like to give the floor to Michele Vianello. We've really got to try and be very quick so that we have some time for the discussion, because we started up pretty late. Michele Vianello from Inventia.
Finite cose.
Yes. Thank you very much. My name is Michele Vianello. I work for a consulting company that specializes in assisting public and private partners in the process of innovating. I was also involved in the administration of a city such as Venice, and so the impact of innovation on cities is something that I am familiar with. So I need the slide projection. I can't find the remote control. Anyway, let's start with the first slide. Something wrong with the projection?
Ma posso anche... Non c'è problema, posso anche andare tranquillamente.
That's all right. I did send the slides in 2 days ago. You should have them, but never mind, as I said. Anyway, Flavia Marsano has already set the stage for what I'm about to say. I would like to try and define 5 criteria to measure smartness, because one of the themes which is often at the heart of our discussions is how do we assess urban environments. I know I'm speaking to people who are going to have to deal with important EU bids and choices for innovation in cities. The first point I would like to make is that the smart cities is not a final destination. People commonly think, and this is a mistake, that one bright morning a city wakes up and finds out that it's become a smart city simply because it's won an EU bid, it has lots of sensors, lots of Wi-Fi areas, and suddenly it thinks it can qualify as a smart city. And many quantitative measurements are based on this statement. But in fact, cities have always been at the heart of innovation throughout history. Innovation that now cities have to deal with is actually more about ICT, information communication technology, technologies that are changing, radically changing at that communication between individuals and between people and objects. So we have to think of things in terms of the quality of interaction thanks to ICT. So what is really changing is not the availability of technology, but rather the different patterns of interaction between people, and urban areas are where this happens to a great extent. The second myth I would like to dispel is that smart cities equal big cities. We're not all in like Mexico City or New Delhi. We're not all like Rio. Actually, most European cities are small to medium-sized. And are these children of a lesser god? Will these cities never be able to qualify as smart? You see, so far, everything has been measured in terms of quantity. Now, I understand that the theme of environment and evolution in cities does impinge upon the issue of size. Mexico City, to name one case, has serious environmental problems, but smart policies don't only concern cities as big as Mexico City, because we know that 80% of Italian cities have less than 200,000 residents. The only true metropolitan cities in Italy are Milan and Rome. Everything else is much smaller than that. Ours is a country characterized by many medium-sized and small-sized cities and towns. The famous Vienna Polytechnic study focused on urban areas with less than 200,000 residents. So, how can we comply with the smartness criteria that European Union measures indicate? Well, we mustn't just look at the size, but rather we have to see how small and medium-sized cities and towns integrate services in order to be more competitive, because as we're all aware, competition is not between nation states but between urban areas that attract investments, urban areas that are inclusive and develop interesting environmental policies that attract young people and develop culture. So actually the exchange involves cities as opposed to nation states. So what is meant by an urban area? That's one point. Then there's a third criterion that I care about, the idea that you're smart if you have a lot of technology available. Now, I don't know about other countries, but in Italy we have these smartness rankings, Milan first and Caltanissetta in Sicily last. And this is done on the basis of the amount of technology. So many sensors and you're smart. You have so many multimedial, interactive whiteboards, and then you're smart. You have Wi-Fi, you're smart. You have so many lamps along the streets with Wi-Fi, fine. But then people don't talk about how technology is used. I don't care if you have whiteboards in classrooms if teachers don't know how to use Wikipedia, because that is not a smartness measurement. There's no point in having Wi-Fi if people don't use it. So what I really care about, and as I'll explain, is not the amount of sensors, but the ability to use the data that the sensors can provide us with. So the real issue is to ensure that everything revolves around human beings. The smart city is characterized by hashtag-aware citizens who can adequately exploit what the world of ICT makes available to us. And therefore, we have to look at things in terms of quality and not quantity. I know it's hard to measure. I know that quality KPIs are a little bit difficult to identify, and everyone measures quantity instead. But if we really want to make headway in this process, we have to look at quality and not quantity. Quantity is a Fordist concept, but we're in cities that have relinquished Fordism. I know that my friend Ermete Relace is probably listening very carefully. For instance, I can say that the synergic combination of two innovations, cloud computing and connectivity on the move, is radically changing the parameters of Fordist cities. Fordist cities are based on pre-established places, times, and roles. You work in a given time window, in a given physical place, and you have a given task. So your life and all of the city is based on this. But cloud plus mobility, internet everywhere, anytime, allows us to rethink Fordist principles. For instance, I'm in favour of electric cars, but I don't want to live in a city that is packed with electric cars. I want to change the system, and I don't want to see more cars necessarily. Whereas people say, oh, electric cars is a solution. Fine, but I don't want to live in a city that is jam-packed with electric cars in a gigantic traffic jam. We can't continue to live in cities as if Fordism was still with us. Cities have to be reorganized, understanding that the world of communication and information changes, and this means changing our urban organizations. It's not about quantity. The important thing is quality, and I know that Flavia Marsano took up very long, so I don't have very much time left. The other key word is inclusion in cities. Let's choose our words carefully. For a long time, the European Union used the term e-government to indicate all those forms of democracies. Now, this is an obsolete term. E-government stands for a unidirectional relationship with the web. In these years, I'm proud to say that I developed many civic networks, but they're all one-directional. Let's point out that we go on the internet to be able to use the social networking platforms. We're on the internet for sharing purposes, for pooling. So we have to shift away from e-government and embrace social government, and terminology should change as a consequence, because everything is based on social networking and sharing, and not a one-way downloading process, as was the case in the past. We want to interact and engage with the government, say what we have to say. We want to use WhatsApp to communicate with our mayor, because that's how we communicate. In Italy, I know people smile at this, but 25 million Italians are on Facebook. And the others use e-booking systems to make hotel reservations. Italians discovered the internet not thanks to the public administration, but thanks to travel apps and social networks. So as a consequence, our terminology must change in order to account for these different increasingly prevalent forms of expression, and the public administration attempts to do this, but it is unable to engage people in a dialogue. It is self-referential, and we have to put an end to this. Self-referential bureaucratic machinery is at odds with the attempt to become smart, which involves dialogue, two-directional exchange and sharing. And this gives rise to a dichotomy that generates conflicts between the idea of public administration and the ways citizens have of expressing themselves. And one final concept has to do with something that goes beyond the parameters established by the University of Vienna. We can't really think of our urban environment as being characterized by sort of silos system, e-government in one, environment in the other, work in the other. The web world requires a horizontal approach. Interaction is what matters. I don't look at the environment as such, but what I do look at is the interaction between different policies. Interaction is what generates value. So it's not about individual aspects and individual best practices. In fact, in my profession, I develop assessment models for cities, and in my assessment models, what I assess are interactions. How different policies can combine to generate far-reaching change. So I don't assess and judge vertical interactions any longer. I only look at interactions that can generate new energy. A smart city is characterized by synergy and relationships. And this is an aspect which I think ought to be taken into consideration when these bids are awarded. Then last remark, I'm involved in social networking professionally, and I can always monitor the recurrence of the term smart city on the web. The term smart city increases in terms of references when there is an EU bid, but then this ends very quickly. Often it's just a fad. So policies to really change the city, whether they have the label smart or not, I don't really care about names, however, are always there. It doesn't matter if they are linked to these bids or not. But then we have to support a non-quantitative virtuous process. It's not about the amount of technologies available, but the way in which these technologies are used by ordinary citizens to improve their life. And so it's not about information technology companies, but public administrations. So information technology producers are the ones that should determine the award of resources for smart city purposes. Otherwise, we will not be able to make the most of the extraordinary opportunities that we have to improve our urban environment. Thank you, not least because of this suggestion to approach things differently. I agree with you completely. And over to Alessandro Rinaldi, who is with the Unit for Economic Studies of Unioncamere, the Union of Italian Chambers of Commerce. Good morning, everybody. I don't know if my slides are available, or yes, they are. I'm here to represent Unioncamere, the Italian Union of Chambers of Commerce,
which has all the Italian Chambers of Commerce. And in dealing with the issues we're discussing here, has to find some concepts to help Italian companies in trying to progress and to work more effectively and create jobs. The results we're going to produce are from a yearly report we publish, which is called Green Italy, and which examines sustainable development and the impact of economic work.
Di sviluppo. Tutto questo ha a che vedere.
And this is very much connected to the issue of what we call territoriality. That is to say, how local environments are involved and how the things we try to deal with have to be looked at from a local standpoint. And chambers of commerce have a provincial structure, provinces, Italian provinces, and so we have a very dense presence initially. When we began to consider the issue of sustainability before, we looked at the core issues of the green economy, the companies involved, and employment. We also addressed a more general issue. We wanted to see what the perception of environmental issues was among the population. And the issue is whether the environment is considered by our population a marginal issue or a fashionable issue or something which isn't linked to future development. And what we see is that comparing 2004 to 2014, we see that whereas there were 39% of people who considered that environmental issues were important, we moved to 74% in 2014. So we need to consider the corporate world, but we also have to consider increasingly households. One issue which is important in smart cities is the difficulty we have to interpret our social and economic realities, and that the boundaries are really becoming more difficult to define. Family, public administration, third sectors are realities that are becoming increasingly aggregated. Economic sectors are less and less boundaries in which you can place activities. We have supply chain and hybridization between different sectors, so we have to interpret reality in a different way. So there's a growing awareness. Many citizens have answered us and have indicated their interest in green services. That 78% is the percentage of people who said that they would spend more to acquire green products or services. At the same time, the other interesting finding in this report is to see who's changed in their perception of responsibility. Here the issue is who has the highest responsibility in safeguarding the environment according to citizens. So citizens now tend to see that companies and citizens have more importance, whereas governments and local authorities are considered to have declining importance. So in the perception, in people's perception, there's a growing importance of the role of consumers and producers. Now, very quickly looking at the Italian situation, we looked at a number of aggregates which we were interested in. not just from a theoretical standpoint, but also from a practical standpoint. And we tried to examine how many green companies there were, companies which were truly working to reduce their negative environmental impact. So we have enumerated 341,400 green enterprises. And as Mr. Relacci was saying, they're performing better than other companies. They managed to sell twice as much abroad compared with other companies. They have more employment, and therefore they've managed to keep their employment levels, and they've also been able to add jobs. Now, looking at local distribution, this is a provincial breakdown. We don't go as far as a municipal breakdown, but we're speaking of Italian provinces here. So we're looking at the situation with regard to green enterprises. So there's quite a lot of manufacturing. And the distribution sees Rome, Milan, Naples, the largest cities in Italy, as areas where there is a significant concentration of this kind of activity. What we also did, I was speaking of jobs previously, was to see which types of employment could be defined as green jobs, and which can have a common thread of sustainability. In Italy, we've assessed 3 million people identified as green jobs. That's 13% of the total, with a geographical distribution which sees a greater presence in the north, northwest, northeast, and then south, and islands, and the centre. So this is what we call the inventory of green jobs. Almost a quarter are people who are younger than 35. So green employment is something which goes hand in hand with youth employment. So helping one helps the other. What's important is not just to look at the inventory, but also, thanks to the system which Union Camera has now set up a few years ago with the Ministry of Labour, we can see the demand for new types of green jobs and activities. This allows us to provide instruments for guidance in labour policies.
E allora abbiamo un dato,
So we have a figure which Hermete was mentioning previously, that green jobs represent a 13% of the overall inventory. But if we add jobs which aren't wholly green, because we've found areas where there are skills which can be defined as partly green, we get to a 60% of non-seasonal hirings. So that's the situation in 2014. When we speak of green jobs, there are some examples. We go from agronomists, environmental engineers, which are connected to manufacturing, but also green copywriters, energy savings technicians, and risk managers. So these are jobs which are more linked to sustainability. These green jobs have increased on a yearly basis in Italy. Today we're at 13.2%, but with a growing trend. So we have an upward trend, and the distribution is similar to what we saw for enterprises. And if we look at the demand for green jobs in industry, we can see that Milan is where there's the highest demand, 22.4%, Turin 20.8%, Sassari in Sardinia has special reasons because there are entrepreneurial activities which are generating green activities, whereas the national average is 13.2%. We also can assess the added value which can be associated to green jobs. We can look at the value which is contributed by green jobs, which is around 10.2%. So what we're doing is assessing the contribution of green jobs and green skills to products. And with this indicator, I think that we're closing the circle so that we can have a kind of overall picture. But there are some supplementary comments I'd like to say with regard to relations with local areas. So if we look at local areas or cities and green activities, we can say that what we can see in our provinces is that we're looking at there's a higher demand for green jobs in urban areas where there's a high concentration of population. This is something which is less visible for the distribution of enterprises. And there is cities are increasingly places where production takes place, and I refer to what Vianella was saying previously. These are data for our country, but you can see how enterprise concentrate in relation to populations. We can see that there's a growing presence of enterprises and populations which reaches a peak in a small size of small urban areas. You see the peak is in the 20 to 50,000 area, and then there's a fall until you reach the high population cities over 500,000. So we got small cities up to 50,000, and then very large cities and metropolises which have many green jobs. And you can see there's a progressive growth from provinces with up to 2,000 inhabitants to those with more than 500,000. And this should lead us think of the integration which is growing between sectors. And in the tertiary sector, there's lots of production of this kind.
Grazie, Rinaldi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rinaldi. It would be interesting to know whether, in terms of macro data, what we have observed applies in other contexts within the European Union. In other words, whether when there's a higher export rate and more employment, companies are the ones these companies are the ones that do better. And we're obviously talking about cross-cutting innovations in terms of saving water, saving materials, and so on. And it'd be interesting to see whether this indicator is relevant in other European Union member countries as well. And if so, to what extent is this linked to the Lisbon agenda? In other words, we need to try and understand to what extent we can identify a European productive model with the necessary features to withstand, let's say, the difficulties stemming from the crisis. We have a list of speakers. Each will have 4 minutes each, which means that that way we can leave enough time for the speakers. And I must apologize at the outset if I will mispronounce your names. The first who has requested the floor is Joyce Sylvester, Netherlands.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a member of the Dutch Senate. I'm chair of the Committee of Social Affairs, and I'm also mayor of a small city called the city of Naarden. Chair, dear colleagues, thank you for this wonderful meeting here in Rome. It's very inspiring, and it's a real pity that we have our last session right now. And maybe it's an idea to get some follow-up maybe next year. It would be wonderful. Chair, dear colleagues, as we are all aware, a lot of UA legislation is accomplished in towns. Currently, 359 million people, 72% of the total European population, live in urban areas. And the percentage of European population is still increasing and will probably reach 80% in 2050. 67% of Europeans' GDP is generated in urban metropolitan areas. In its communication, Urban Dimensions of EU policies, the main features of a European urban agenda, the Commission outlines the importance and power of cities. Cities are engines of economic growth and encourage innovation. Cities are really important for balanced regional development and are key actors in achieving the EU 2020 objectives. Because of the concentration of living space, people, transport and economic activity, cities can play a decisive role to face the UA-wide challenges. Energy, saving, efficient use of resources, ensuring a healthy environment, job creation and the achievement of the UA climate objectives. Otherwise, as the Commission rightly states, Europe still experiences many problems such as poverty, unemployment, social and special segregation or degradation of the environment. There is a strong urban dimension linked to these issues. Problems and solutions meet each other in European urban areas. We should use these potency, Chair, of European urban areas where problems and solutions meet each other, and the urban dimension should be more embedded in the European policy. Therefore, the urban agenda is very important to the Netherlands. On the initiative of the Netherlands and Belgium in 2015, Member States launched a partnership to create an urban agenda. The aims are to map out the policy areas with the urban dimension is insufficient, to create a stronger urban dimension in EU policies, and to create more cooperation between cities, countries and the UA in these areas and design. What do Dutch cities and countries expect from the UA? New UA regulations should take into account the consequences for urban areas and leave room for an area-based approach, and there is a clear link with the smart regulation policy. In addition, cities, Member States and the Commission should share best practices and use the existing financial instruments for more efficiently to promote further urban development in Europe. The European Urban Agenda should provide a framework for better collaboration at European level. At the same time, an area-based approach will face a lot of different administrative players, including the European, with sometimes different interests. A lack of coordination and too much administrative pressure can hinder the effectiveness of comprehensive planning, and with fewer obstacles, cities would be larger and thus more productive. This also, Chair, calls for a European urban agenda. The point of departure should be on European level, we need to be national and local whenever possible. Where Europe has a clear role, the rules and regulations should be proportional and enforceable. The Netherlands supports this initiative of the Commission. The Committee of the Regions follows this line of thinking with the recent report towards an integrated approach to the cities in the European Union. Thank you for your attention.
Grazie.
Thank you for your interesting remarks, and with reference to the previous session, we too are focusing on the importance of information exchange and the importance of coordinating policies to ensure that the European Union can play a key role in this sector as in others. And this is a theme that we should never forget. There's a motto that was typical in the cities of the Middle Ages in Italy, that the air of cities makes you free. I hope that this could apply to the European Union as well. I would like to now call on Vincenzo Garofalo. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Vincenzo Garofalo. I'm a member of the Chamber of Deputies Committee on Transport, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to join you because the subject, cities as drivers of innovation, as the previous colleague quite rightly pointed out, are a theme that deserves all our attention. Actually, we should really focus on this theme extensively, because we know how many people choose to live in cities and consider cities as not just a place where they can live, but where they can also thrive and have more opportunities. I think that investing in cities in Europe, and especially the oldest cities, is important. We need to develop more effective policies than the ones we've seen so far. For instance, at the end of 2013, the European Commission and subsequently the Council and the European Audit Court indicated that investing in urban areas has had very positive spin-offs. I was very interested in listening to the various speakers who've explained what is meant by smart cities. Smart cities are not just about the number of IT devices available, but they're more about how technology can improve the quality of life of the city residents. And setting aside the theme of information technology briefly, I would like to talk about transport, which is something that we deal with in our committee. The topic of transport is crucial for large cities. Firstly, because even though we can't electrify all cars, because that wouldn't be the true form of innovation, we need to look at mobility in such a way that public and private means of transport can be effective and complementary. And this is what happens in information technology systems. So in other words, if we transfer our best practices, looking at what happens in various European cities, some are actually very advanced. They have linked railway networks with cycling routes, and this gives workers and residents freedom to move. Unless we do this, unless we guarantee freedom of mobility, we cannot guarantee equal opportunities. We have already said that Italy is lagging behind other countries in this area, so I would like to point out that our ability to invest in urban mobility and traditional mobility should be done to develop synergies between the various modes of transport, as is indicated by some EU financing guidelines. We need to invest more and give states the, let's say, task of dealing with this essential priority. And we have to also share best practices as best we can. Italy is always considered as lagging behind, but there is one experience that I would like to share with you. Since 2006, all vehicles above 3.5 tons by law must have reflective material along the contours of the vehicles so that they can be more visible when visibility is poor. We know that these vehicles, for the most part, circulate outside city limits, but they also are visible in many cities. And this use of light reflecting strips has been very useful in reducing the number of accidents, and I think this is a very simple and cheap solution, and maybe Europe could look at this Italian experience and disseminate this not just for new vehicles but also our vehicle stock. I would like to conclude by saying that as far as cities are concerned, we need to work harder and more effectively so as to guarantee that there can be a standard degree of freedom of movement with the appropriate investment. Thank you very much. And now I would like to call on Rupert Lichtenegger. I apologize for my accent. She's an Austrian Member of Parliament, and Austria has a lot to teach us in the field of transport, and especially with regard to the limits placed on road transport compared to what we've done.
Danke, Herr Vorsitzender. Für die sehr interessanten Beispiele, die Sie aus der Region.
Thank you for the very interesting examples from Italy. All the examples you mentioned, for example, from Milan, the car-sharing project. And of course, we can say that smart cities say that they raise the quality of life for their citizens. They want to be more efficient, more progressive, more socially inclusive. But what matters just as much is that they are environmentally friendly. And I think we have heard some very good examples of green jobs. Green jobs are also very important in Austria. We now have 180,000 jobs that we count as green jobs, and their importance is growing. We know that companies that invest in this area have very high research quotas, they're very dynamic, and they're very fast at creating jobs. What Mr. Rinaldi said was very interesting, everything that he said about the green economy and green jobs in Italy. And I would like to give an example from Austria. Upper Austria is a region with 1.4 inhabitants, and it's a very industrialized region. Green jobs play an increasingly important role in this area. We have about 150 companies that work on green energy, and they have even formed alliances in order to joint research and development and in order to venture onto international markets. They have come together in what we call a cluster, and it works very well. They have very strong development potential. They're growing very dynamically, and they create very important jobs. At the same time, they illustrate that green ideas and economic development go together very well. And that, I think, is a great opportunity for Austria. But it's also a great opportunity for all of Europe, as we have heard this morning. It is important for the growing cities, for what we call the smart cities, no matter whether we're talking about big agglomerations or small towns. But it's not all that easy. Policymakers have to create a framework which enables these cities to grow. That has already been said by the speakers. And, of course, we also need the support of the European Union. The question here is how, in the field of research and development, we can strengthen that focus on renewable energies, energy efficiency, and also on saving energy. It's not only an approach that will save the industry a whole lot of money and the citizens as a consequence, but that holds a lot of potential for new jobs. At the same time, it makes an important contribution to protecting our climate. Thank you.
Grazie, perfetto.
Thank you, brilliant. And you quite rightly stressed an important point, i.e. energy saving, and this has an impact on employment, of course, starting with the construction sector. There's a lot that can be done, for instance, to reduce the cost of energy for households and to increase job opportunities. You mentioned Milan. I would like to point out that at the moment, Vienna and Milan are the two European cities with more than 1 million inhabitants with the highest rate of separate waste collection. Let's see how the others can do on this front. But Milan and Vienna are the two European cities that do best in terms of separate waste collection. And now over to Paolo Gandolfi.
Grazie Presidente, grazie all'invito a questo incontro.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I am a member of the Chamber of Deputies Committee on Transport, and I coordinate the Interparliamentary Committee on Cycling Mobility and New Mobility. The subject of sustainable mobility or smart mobility in urban areas is of relevance here. I think there's a point that various participants have already stressed. Generally, when we talk about mobility, we fail to go beyond a discussion on environmental and economic sustainability. This certainly can have a positive impact, but this does not necessarily represent the solution to really change cities' economic overall performance. Economic performance and environmental performance may improve, but at the end of the day, this may not have a significant impact on a city's ability to produce intelligence, relationships, and so on. In European cities as a whole, as Mr. Vianello said, we know that manufacturing is no longer relevant, and the strength of the cities in Europe lies in developing a characteristic that is important for their future, i.e. the ability to give people, city residents, opportunities to meet and interact. We know that cities, in fact, are often isolated spheres, family sphere, work sphere, and any other activity that citizens may decide to engage in. And in these cities, the way we move from one sphere to the other, or from one place to the other, can be a functional problem. Now, we know that in European cities, we spend a lot of time on the move, and making movement and mobility and opportunity for people to interact with each other and with the system is fundamental if we want a successful, sustainable and smart mobility. So it's not just about reducing CO2 emissions or reducing noise emissions or fine particulate matter in our cities. We cannot offer citizens erratic, unprogrammed interaction opportunities. We should, on the other hand, develop a different system, a different mobility approach, so that we're no longer isolated, which is what happens if you use private vehicles, electric or not. And we have to therefore use alternatives, modes of transport, bicycles, public transport, and so on, mass transit systems, so as to turn the travel times into an opportunity to produce, innovate, and exchange intelligence. So I think that we must understand that our cities are no longer manufacturing centres. We will not produce cars, steel beams and fabrics, but we will produce ideas, services in the cities, and the inputs for that are people and the ability for people to exchange information. This is where we should be heading. And this is not happening, at least it's not happening in Italy, and we're going to have to try and step up our effort to this end. I think that the contribution that the European Union can give is to encourage European cities to do this, and obviously as individuals and as cities we have to become more fully integrated into European projects. There are two projects, the Civitas initiative and the Urbact project, which are very useful to this end and could possibly be guided towards an objective that should not be isolated. The subject of sustainable or smart mobility is not about need, but about opportunity that we need to develop and exploit to the full. Thank you. Thank you to Paolo Gandolfi. And if we were to try and find a slogan, it's not about duties and obligations, but it's about discovering the pleasure of sharing, of being together. And I hope that my colleagues will appreciate the fact that thanks to our excellent partnership with with God, we have wonderful weather here in Rome, and we can explore the city at will, using whatever mode of mobility we may choose. Over to Vincent van Quickenborn, Belgium.
Presidente, grazie.
Thank you very much.
A member of parliament, but also a mayor of a city like my colleague, Mrs. Sylvester, of a city of 75,000 people in Belgium. And I fully agree with what Mr. Vianello said about how we look at the issues. If I read what the European Commission publishes, it's all about technology. They talk about 3G, 4G, bandwidth, and so on. I think that is it's a wrong approach. It's a wrong approach. Why? Because it's not about technology. It's about conversation. How do you build strong communities? And what we need to do, I think there are three things that we need to do. First of all, politicians and people of the administration should engage in the communication. What I see with colleagues of mine is they engage in conversation on Twitter and Facebook before the elections, and once the elections are over, you don't see them anymore. So you should really engage and conversate with people. Secondly, you should work on practical solutions. It's a bit pity I cannot show them on the screens, but we've worked on, as a smart city, we've worked on practical solutions. When I was a minister, I was in New York, and I put up the idea of, in New York they have a unique number called 311. There are 20 million calls come in every year. 20 million calls. It's New York. It's big, of course. And so we set up in small Kortrijk an identical number, 1711. 1777, excuse me, 1777, and people can call in. We receive about 20,000 calls a year about potholes, illegal dumping, abandoned bikes, and we also created an app, 1777 of course, where you can take a picture and immediately locate by your geographical data in the phone where you've taken that picture. And the whole of our back office of the city is concentrated on this, so that we can find solutions for the problems that are communicated, and every week we get a report of the statuses. Second thing that we've done is we've made some of our parking spots intelligent. We've put a 3G, 4G eye in the ground, and people can see live on their screens for 250 parking spots now on the street when it's free or not free. Why have we created it? Because we wanted to make free our public spaces, Grand Place and other things. And our local shop owners, they ask for parking spots. And so if you limit those parking spots to 30 minutes, then people come and buy, and then they leave. And if you stay longer than 30 minutes, you pay €25 fee. But you don't need a ticket, you don't need an SMS, you don't need a text message. It goes like that. And it's a big success. and it gives us open data. And a third thing that we've done is that we've published, this was very controversial, on a map on a daily basis, all crime data and traffic data. For example, if we know where most of the traffic accidents with bikes happen, so we concentrate our speed controls on there. Same for crime, where the burglars are, people know which areas are safe and which are less safe. It was controversial to publish that because people thought that the value of their houses would go down. But if you work in an open, transparent way, in a way it's a stimulus for the public authorities to act. And the third thing I would like to mention is that we need a performant network. Do not underestimate that the future is there with open Wi-Fi and free Wi-Fi on public spaces, free 3G on public spaces. You need that. If you look at the cities of Barcelona and the city of Amsterdam, which are the two best smart cities in Europe, they've done that. Why is that? Because it's not up to the city to develop all kinds of applications. If you open your network to small and big companies to come up with concrete solutions in the area of energy, mobility and health, then they use your city as a living lab, a laboratorium. They're using it as a living lab to come up with solutions. The city is a producer, not an actor of these things. You should let the market play its role and also the creativity. A final tip I would like to give to you, Presidente, is to invite a CIO, because in Amsterdam and Barcelona they have a CIO. They have somebody who's full-time employed as a chief intelligence officer, developing those kinds of examples and applications. And if you want to get the young people happy and enthusiastic and energetic about these issues, come up with concrete solutions, come up with examples, instead of the general blah, blah, blah of technology, bandwidth, and so on. Thank you.
No, mi sembra che io sono...
I agree. I think that the theme of the necessary link between technological innovation and human factor is coming back. The strength of communities, relations between people, as a key for thinking about the future. We had it in relation to transportation, now we have it in relation to future technology, but many people have stressed this. And the last speaker on my list is Päivi Lipponen from Finland.
Thank you for your presentation.
Della collega, ecco, la gaffa è stata...
Sorry, he referred to you as he instead of she.
Thank you for your presentations. We all share the idea of the need to build smart cities, stop climate change, and build sustainable growth in a socially and ecologically. We need new innovation, new technology, new ICT services. These have been our themes during this meeting. In Finland, we are talking about knowledge management. I think we need better evaluation. We need to have indicators that provide information to support decision-making. We need to pay more attention to the measurements tools. Now I'm afraid that tools are often old and produce only information that was easy to measure. I really believe that we can get information from the best solutions and we can develop technology to solve big challenges and build these better cities, smart cities and better life. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you. I would now like to give the floor to the keynote speakers for replies. So we'll start with Dr. Marzano.
Una relazione tra il concetto di...
I'd like to have say something about the relationship between democracy and smart cities. Democracy is something which we strive for, but we never reach absolute democracy. And here I agree with what Michele Diana was saying. The same applies to smart cities. We improve things, we progress, but we will never reach an absolute, because luckily there'll always be something we want to do. One instrument, particularly for mobility, I heard some members from the Transportation Committee. One very powerful tool can be big data analysis, which allows us to restructure cities, areas, in relation to mobility. If you understand, there's N,000 people moving from A, B, and only M vehicles from A to B. This is something which you can use to redefine local areas. A study of this kind was conducted in Tuscany, which is a rather large area, and we saw from this research that the current provinces are reasonable, but in some areas there are gaps, and there's no reason for there to be there because they aren't in line with what the experience of citizens in those areas is. And then I'll say something very trite: technologies are a means and not an end. That's obvious, but it's essential not to apply technologies to the wrong kind of organization. If we just map technology based on a mistaken organizational structure, based on the time and motion, old-fashioned time and motion in a city, based on 19th century patterns, there's no, that's not meaningful. We have to create strong communities. A Belgian colleague was saying, I agree with that, and communication, you said, was also essential. I also agree this. Too often we've seen politicians during election campaigns using technologies and social networks as a leaflet, a pamphlet, which you throw away after the election. You have to use things which are of more lasting significance, and listening is an essential phase. We were speaking of a phone number. There's a phone number in Rome which is 060606, which is open 24/7, and people can ask anything which is linked to the city. What have I got to do to get from here to there? Which post office is close to us? Which hospital can I go to treat this disease? So these instruments that work. There are open source platforms like Fix My Street. I'm sure you've heard of it. Which Michele is smiling, but you can tell us while you're smiling later. This is a way to make it possible to for citizens to report problems. Citizens are readier to participate than politicians are. All too often, politicians find it too difficult to adopt technologies as something which they use on a daily basis. And the last point concerns training, which was talked about effectively by the director of the Italian Institute for Technology Training. The PISA report analyzes the scientific skills of teenagers, 15-year-olds. I don't want to tell you where Italy ranks. I said something about the rank in the global gender gap, which is quite depressing, but if you look at the top ranks, and it's no coincidence, you have China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japan, countries which have emerging innovation, and I think that it's necessary to train young people in scientific subjects more than we do now. So to train young people, we need to train teachers, and we also need to train our politicians to adopt adequate policies. Thank you. Two very quick comments. The first one is that city administrators need forecasting tools which we didn't have previously. In the past, the time of change was very long. Now we have very, very rapid change, and forecasting systems aren't adequate. For the public utilities sector, I would suggest that there has to be hashtag aware way of making use of knowledge which you can glean from sensors a sensor connected to the network on a bus can tell us a huge amount of things about the quality of life in a city. It tells us how many passengers there are, whether it's optimized or not, the emissions, the satisfaction of people riding, and inside a water pipe it can tell us the purity of the water. If we make use of this technology, we have an endless source of information. There are two missing pieces. One is the technology to visualize data, because these data can't be given to the public administration or to citizens who want to see performance. Citizens need to see performances now, and we need to develop visualization systems. We have to find ways of making data visible so that they can be used by people. And the second thing is the possibility of serializing these data. Big data technology is indispensable for the public too. Today, big data can't be just left to the private sector. It's something which the public has to be able to use too. And professions linked to people who can interpret data will be increasingly in demand. Second thing is that if today participation occurs through an awareness of the data, an awareness of how citizens and cities react, we increasingly need cities as laboratories, because these are things which are totally new culturally. They're not part of our standard idea of democracy. A laboratory city is a new concept, but it's something which we won't be able to escape. And I would suggest, and then I'll conclude, that you make use of the movements which you have in Northern Europe, like in the city, the possibility of rereading city hackers, possibility of rereading urban areas in a different way. I was smiling when you mentioned Fix My Street, because a long time ago I was the first person in Italy to transform Fix My Street. It's not technology isn't the issue, because the platform is straightforward. The fact is that 1 minute after a citizen reported a problem, your machine isn't ready to respond. So it has a boomerang effect on the city administration. So what you need to do is to adapt our self-referential instruments to the times involved in cities and what citizens want. This is something which is increasingly necessary. Thank you. Alessandro Rinaldi. Thank you. I've also got some points to make. One thing which I didn't stress, and which is something which certainly applies to our country but could be of interest to others, is that our small enterprises, we have lots of small enterprises, and they found a way of associating themselves as a way to deal with the environment. So if we have small entrepreneurial realities, there's an increasing use of this kind of instrument. We have small companies pooling their activities. And I would stress one point which I don't think has come up enough, which is the mobility of goods. It's not just people who move, goods too. So people live in cities, but goods have to reach economic operators, because there are lots of craftsmen, for example, in our cities, and there should be platforms which allow progressive development of e-commerce. And so increasingly the issue is an issue of moving goods and having storage areas for the circulation of goods. This is something which is very demanding. It requires a reorganization of cities. If you think of our old cities particularly, where there are lots of constraints and lots of obstacles to circulation. So I would stressed the issue of goods circulation. Another point, data. Here too I'd like to say something. The use of technology, and I'm saying this as a statistician, generates a huge amount of quantitative information which has not been tapped adequately in many areas. We still don't know how to process and harvest this information. A lot of systems are used in terms of the information they can give. For example, there's everybody uses tools like world maps or systems like that to find addresses, but people use this less to do commercial planning in a city and to see better ways of organizing distribution, to improve the use of information. There's also a skills gap in our country here. Our administrators don't have that much know-how in this area. The interpretation capability, I'm not talking about people being transformed into statisticians, but we're speaking of improving people's ability to use information. And thank you. I think that it would be very arrogant to try and summarize such a wide-reaching and thorough debate. So I don't want to make the end of the day too difficult. I'd like to tell you a couple of stories. The first one is linked to a story by Isaac Asimov, a great science fiction writer. In the 50s, he wrote a story which was called 9 times 7. In this story, he talks about humans being governed by computers, divided into two blocks. And these two blocks are at war. The computers produce increasingly sophisticated weapons. But neither of these two blocks prevails, and balance is maintained. At some point in one of the two blocks, a man is found in one of the two blocks, a marginalized person, a person in a semi-abandoned house, and is the last person who can do multiplication by on paper. Without using a computer. And when that man teaches other people how to do multiplication, division by hand, the link between technological progress and that manual ability leads that block to win. So I think that we have to find the link between technological progress and human factors. We have to have a dialogue, capability of city administrations to exchange knowledge and cooperate. And here I'd like to say that for Italy and Europe, the future has an old heart. There should be major investment in high-tech research and innovation, but it shouldn't lead us to lose our souls. Perhaps some of you know of a painting which is very famous in Italy. It's the fresco of Good Government, Buon Governo in Siena, which describes a city which, according to the principles of the time, was well governed. This is a fresco which was painted in the early 14th century in Siena, but 20 years earlier, Siena, which was a very aggressive city, it was not a pacifist city. If you ask the Florentines or other neighboring cities what the people of Siena were like, they wrote a constitution of Siena in 1309, which is a beautiful document. There are two lines which I think are a very good program for the future. This proud and aggressive city said in its constitution, those who govern should care for the beauty of the city most, for the pleasure and enjoyment of the foreigners, and for the honor and the growth of the city and its citizens. I think that is a wonderful statement. Those who govern have to take care of the beauty of the city for the pleasure and the enjoyment of outsiders, of foreigners. Perhaps we might call this marketing today. And this perhaps is also the mission of Europe in the world. There's a beautiful sentence in the preamble to the European Constitution which didn't end up well, but it spoke of Europe as a privileged area for human hope. And the people of Siena said this for the honor, prosperity and growth of the city and its citizens. Honor is a very special thing. You can't measure it and you can't buy it, but without honor you can't have a good economy. You don't have the prosperity and the growth of the city and its citizens. So I would like to think that our future is a combination of maximum investment into technology and knowledge with the maximum value given to our identity, our souls, and that the roots of the future in this way will be strong on our continent. Thank you.
Scusa, mi dicono che bisogna fare...
I've been told that we have to have a photo taken as well, a group photo, and then there's lunch. So, all right, so you'll be accompanied to the stairs where there'll be a wonderful photo taken.